Your host, Congressman Buck McKeon.
So I have some legislation that says if the federal government comes in and buys the property, then they ought to be willing to pay the taxes that anybody else would pay. And so they need to be held accountable as well.
I'm a strong supporter of that because, I didn't know that there were eastern districts that had that. In the West, that's a real big problem. Like I have a large county, Inyo County, that is, I think there are only out of 10,000 square miles in the county, there's only a few square miles that is owned privately. It's owned by, the rest of it's owned by the forest, U.S. government, or BLM, U.S. government, or years and years ago, the city of L.A. came up and bought up all the land, all the flat land, to get their water rights, and they took the water south to L.A. So very little of the land is owned by other than government. So I've been a strong supporter of that impact aid. One of the things that in No Child Left Behind, it was due for reauthorization last year. And the president had, on January 8th, which was the 5th anniversary, January 8th of 2007, President Bush had Senator Kennedy, Senator Enzi, Chairman Miller, Secretary Spellings, myself in the Oval Office trying to kick us off to get a good start on the reauthorization of that bill. And at the time, Senator Kennedy said, I'll have the bill out by March. And Chairman Miller on the House side said, we'll be a little bit later, but we'll have it done. He said, we want to work first on higher education. Well, we're now over a year since that meeting. There were other meetings in the interim. I know Mrs. Bush had some of us in the White House a few times to talk about what we could do to spur the interest on this. And we were working, our committee staff and the Democrat committee staff, working in a bipartisan way. We had lots of hearings. And to this date, neither Chairman Miller on the House side nor Chairman Kennedy on the Senate side have even introduced a bill. And I know they expected to have it passed last year. So there was even an article out that Chairman Miller had held a press conference and was blaming the president for not reauthorizing No Child Left Behind. I said, well, that's really not a little civics lesson how we do things in Washington. The president does not write legislation. He does not pass legislation. It's the chairman of the committee's responsibility to introduce the legislation, to carry it through the process, to get it passed in both the House and the Senate, and go through the conference process. And finally, when you get a bill to the president's desk, he can either sign it or veto it. He works with us to encourage us to get stuff done, but basically it's to the point now where politics have probably predetermined. The unions have come out against it. I know the Democratic candidates have come out against it, and it looks like this Congress, we're probably not going to get the reauthorization done of No Child Left Behind, and that's a sad thing, because probably some of the things that came out in your forum, I know I've held lots of those type meetings around the country. People told me that it is working. When it was first passed, there was a lot of resistance. People they don't want accountability. They want to just, the feeling was, we're doing fine, just leave us alone. But after a period of time, and the testing showing the results, and people could see it is working. And while they had problems with it, they could see that it was moving forward. But they did have lots of suggestions. And I'm sure some came out in your meeting, such as the growth models, such as special ed, such as the way we group people into the different subgroups, how one person could could carry several different subgroups down because they would be a minority student. They might also be a special ed student. And those kind of things I felt we could address and could fix through a reauthorization. And did some of that come out in your forum, some of the suggestions?
It certainly did. And going back to Chairman Miller, I tell you what I think the American people are looking for right now is real leadership. They're frustrated with raw politics. They're tired of red states and blue states. They're looking for red, white, and blue states. They're looking for us to come together, pass common sense legislation. And that's the chairman's responsibility. And he said he would do it last year. It's still not done. And I called on the chairman to bring this up. And one of the things that I didn't know coming to Washington, I thought coming in, like most citizens, if you're supposed to reauthorize something, and if it's not reauthorized, it just stops. And I'm sure there's probably some teachers and probably some parents and probably some voters across the country who said, well, that's not a bad thing, just let it go away. The unfortunate thing is, if it's a bad bill and it comes up for reauthorization and it doesn't actually come before the committee, the bad bill continues to be a bad bill. It doesn't get fixed. And some of the things that I heard during my sessions of listening to educators and business leaders, community leaders, and parents was they are concerned about English as a second language. Mm-hmm. They're concerned about children that have special needs. I think every child should be moving from point A to point B to point C, but not every child, in my opinion, can go from point A to point Z. And the school system shouldn't be held accountable if they're just people that can't make that leap. I think graduation rates need to be re-looked at. There are people that drop out of school when they're 16. I would say they shouldn't do that. There are consequences for your actions. But at age 18 or 20, you decide, boy, I made a mistake. I want to go back and get a GED. That should be counted towards your graduation rate. And then highly qualified teachers. I went through an ROTC program in high school. One of the best things that ever happened to me is going through Air Force Junior ROTC. Now they're saying that those sergeants that have spent their life in the military, that don't have a bachelor's degree, they may have an associate's degree, they definitely have military training of over 20 years. They're saying they have to have a bachelor's degree or you can't have an ROTC program. We need that civics lessons and that political pride and that morale that comes out of a junior ROTC program. Those are some of the things we could fix if it would come to the committee for reauthorization. I have a school in my district in Hawkins County, up in the mountains, hard to get to. They actually have 8 people graduating a year, 8 people coming out of that class. 4 of those people last year received scholarships. That means 50% out of that graduating class went on to become to go to college under a scholarship. Unfortunately, that's a failing school. The reason it's a failing school, 1 out of the 8 dropped out of school. So now only 7 are going to graduate. So 4 out of 7, over 50%, receive scholarships to go on to college. But because 1 didn't go on and complete his high school education, that school is a failing school because of the percentages. Those things need to be fixed in the piece of legislation.
You know, I've been here now a little bit longer than you have, and I've participated in this process a little longer, and I have not yet seen the perfect piece of legislation. And that's why we have these reauthorizations. It gives us a chance to, after something is implemented, by the time it gets fully implemented throughout the country, you have a chance to see it in action and say, well, that isn't quite what we wanted. That's not the result we wanted to see.